Florence in the 1600s was one of the most beautiful, powerful, and carefully controlled cities in all of Europe. At the turn of the 17th century, roughly 70,000 people lived within these walls. That number sounds modest by modern standards. But in this city, nearly every street, every bridge, every stone courtyard had been shaped by centuries of wealth, ambition, and artistic genius. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints of Florence back to life. That means we can shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through these same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We can look down into a crowded piazza, cross a river bridge lined with glittering stalls, or step inside a walled garden that only the ruling family was allowed to enter. What you are seeing is Florence as it looked, felt, and breathed during the 17th century under the rule of the Medici Grand Dukes of Tuscany. This view shows the Florence skyline from the eastern hills, and one shape dominates everything else. The dome of Santa Maria del Fiore rises above the rooftops like a great red mountain of brick and stone. Brunelleschi had completed it nearly 2 centuries earlier, in 1436, and by the 1600s it had become the symbol of the city itself. Nothing was allowed to compete with it. No tower, no palace, no church could be built tall enough to challenge its profile against the sky. Standing at street level below it, you would hear the bells before you saw the doors. Deep, resonant, rolling across terracotta rooftops. The piazza in front of the cathedral was rarely quiet. Pilgrims arrived here from across Italy and beyond. Merchants used the wide steps as a meeting point. Children ran between the legs of slow-moving crowds. The facade of the cathedral in this period was still incomplete. Bare stonework, rough and unfinished, a strange contrast to the magnificent dome above. That unfinished facade would remain that way for another 250 years. It was a reminder that even in Florence, not everything was perfect. But the interior was overwhelming. Frescoes covered the interior of the dome, depicting the Last Judgment in terrifying scale. Visitors craned their necks upward in something between devotion and genuine fear. The Duomo was the spiritual anchor of the city. To be seen worshipping here was as much a political act as a religious one. The Medici Grand Dukes understood this well. Today, the cathedral still stands in almost exactly the same position relative to the city around it. The dome remains the defining silhouette of Florence. This view shows the great open square that had been the political heart of Florence since the medieval period. By the early 1600s, the Piazza della Signoria was something between a stage and a marketplace. The Palazzo Vecchio, the old fortress palace of the city government, anchored the eastern end, its tall crenellated tower visible from almost anywhere in the city. In the courtyard just inside, a fountain played. On the loggia to one side, marble statues stood in open air, watched by anyone who passed. The square itself was paved with stone, worn smooth by generations of feet and cartwheels. Merchants set up near the edges. Soldiers from the Grand Duke's garrison moved in small groups. Tourists, or rather wealthy travelers on what we might today call a grand tour, stopped here to sketch and observe. But this square had a darker history. This was where, in 1497 and 1498, the monk Savonarola had gathered crowds and burned books, paintings, and mirrors in the famous bonfire of the Vanities. And it was here, shortly after, that Savonarola himself was burned. That memory had not fully faded. In the 1600s, the square was calmer but still charged with political weight. Any public announcement, any display of Medici power, happened here. Executions, festivals, and processions all used the same paved ground. Remarkably, the Piazza della Signoria survives today almost unchanged in its essential form. The Palazzo Vecchio still stands. The statues in the loggia are still there. This view shows the most famous bridge in Florence, and one of the most distinctive bridges in all of Europe. The Ponte Vecchio stretches across the River Arno at its narrowest crossing point in the city center. By the 1600s, the bridge was lined on both sides with small, overhanging workshops and stalls, their upper stories jutting out over the water below. The bridge had been rebuilt in its current form after a catastrophic flood in 1333, and it had been busy ever since. But something important had changed just before the century began. Grand Duke Ferdinando I had ordered the butchers and tanners, who for years had operated their bloody, foul-smelling trades on the bridge, to leave. He found the smell undignified. In their place came goldsmiths and jewelers. By the early 1600s, the Ponte Vecchio had transformed into a glittering corridor of precious metal and gemstones. You could stand at the near end of the bridge and hear the hammering of gold, smell the charcoal from small forges, watch apprentices carry trays of finished rings and chains to customers who had come from across Europe to buy. The light on the water below flickered and shifted. The current was strong and cold. The bridge was also a social crossing point. Every class of person used it. Wealthy merchants in fine wool coats passed fishermen carrying their morning catch. Foreign diplomats walked beside barefoot children. High above all of them, invisible and enclosed, ran the Vasari corridor, the private passage of the Medici Grand Dukes. And today? The Ponte Vecchio still stands. It is one of only a handful of bridges in Florence that survived the Second World War intact. The goldsmiths are still there. When you walk through Florence today, across the Ponte Vecchio, into the Piazza della Signoria, under the shadow of the Duomo, the distance between now and then can feel surprisingly small. The stones are the same. Many of the buildings are the same. The curve of the river through the city is the same. What has changed is the noise, the smell, the weight of daily survival that every person in the 17th century carried with them through these streets. If there is another city, another moment, or another scene from history you would like to see explored this way, please let me know in the comments. These places deserve to be remembered, and I would love to hear which one we should visit next. Again, thank you so much for watching.